Thank you, Kathy. Would you join me in a moment of prayer today? Most gracious and holy God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. All right, so we're continuing this sermon series called Drawn In, where we're looking at this creative nature that is in all of us because we were made in the image of the master creator. And so we looked at, originally we looked at having a dream or a vision, and then we talked about kind of hovering and sitting with that dream or vision for a little while. And then finally today, we're looking at taking that first step, to taking a risk, to actually going all in. So I don't know if you all have ever done anything like wood lathing. Anybody used a spinning lathe? I know nothing about them, I'm just saying. But my husband was able to create this. But you know what? Once you make that first cut, you're all in. You know, you can make changes while you go. You can fix repairs and things like that, but you're pretty much dedicated at that point. I thought about someone who carves marble or something like that. You know, you got to make that first cut at some point. You can stare at that block for a while, but at some point, you got to break out the chisel and make that first cut. And then at that point, you're all in, right? So it's all about this idea of risk. And so with that said, I wanted to talk about the stock market. Yep. I'm going to talk about the stock market. Y'all didn't know this is the money talk, did you? Okay, there it is. We get into this every now and then, but yeah. So think about the stock market. Those of us who are closer to retirement have a little less tolerance for risk. It's all about how much risk can you handle, right? So if you're getting close to retirement, you really don't want to risk the ups and downs of the stock market as much as someone who is much further away from retirement. They've got time, right? Time is on their hand, and so the idea is that you will continue to build your wealth, but you can tolerate the ups and downs. And let me just say, there are ups and downs in the stock market, right? And so you can tolerate those if you've got more time, right? It's all about managing risk. How much risk are we willing to take? How risky is it for us to take a dream or a vision for Brook Hill and then kind of sit with it for a little bit and turn it into a reality? To take that first step, to step out in faith and believe that God is with us when we know that God is guiding us in whatever God is calling us to do. So in our parable, we have two servants that were all in. They received a 100% return on their investment. How many of you all would like to receive an ROI such as 100%? That's pretty darn good. I don't know that it gets much better than that. I mean, yeah, possible, but that's a pretty good return on your investment, right? But one servant succumbed to fear. He succumbed to fear. And it helps us, I think, in this parable to recognize some qualities of the master that we learn, particularly from this third servant. First of all, we know that this master typically reaps where he did not sow and harvests where he did not plant. In other words, he's used to making money through this idea of investing, right? He's not used to a classic agrarian thing. Let me just say, if you are a gardener and you plant potatoes, you cannot expect to reap corn. It doesn't work, all right? You reap what you sow, right? And sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes you sow something and the elements aren't with you that year. I am so grateful for the would-be farmers here at the church, because if you notice, there's a share table out there. It's give what you can, take what you need. And so I'm having a hard time growing zucchini this year, but I'm thinking somebody else grows a lot of it. I mean, it tends to grow a lot for some folks. For some reason, it's not growing for me this year. So, so we share what we have, right? But this particular master is very used to making money through this idea of investing, not necessarily through this reaping and sowing. And so that's one thing we know about the master. We also know that he has reasonable expectations for his servants. He does not expect the one he's entrusted with two, and I will use the word talents because that was the unit of measure that was used in some translations. And I want to use that word talent because we're going to talk more about that. But the one that had 2 talents was not expected to give a return like the guy who had 5 talents. It was a 1-for-1, right? And so the master gave based on what their ability was. He seemed very fair in that manner. But the other thing we know from this third servant is he's a harsh man. He says, so right, well, I knew you were a harsh man. And so the third servant succumbs to fear, and I wonder about us. How easy is it for us to succumb to our fear? It had me thinking about fears this week, and there are numerous fears that are diagnosed fears, and I am not making fun of these in any way, shape, or form. These are fears that can be debilitating for those who suffer. But some of them are interesting and unusual, and I wanted to see if you could kind of guess what they are. The first one is aurorophobia. All of these are phobias, fears. Auroraphobia. What do you think that one means? Anybody? It's the fear of the northern lights. I didn't know that. How about thalassophobia? Thalassophobia. You all are doing it right now, so you cannot have this fear. It's the fear of being seated, the fear of sitting down. Can you imagine being debilitated by such a fear that you can't sit down? So if that is thalassophobia, then what do you think stasbisbassophobia is? Fear of standing up and walking. How debilitating is that one for someone who's afraid to stand and walk? Wow. Yeah, that can be debilitating. This one is one that I could easily fall into, levophobia. Levophobia. Well, it's the fear of anything on the left side. And the reason I say that is I have no peripheral vision on my left side anymore. So I'm waving my hand, but I can't see it right now. And whenever we're out in a crowd, I always like to have my husband on my left side because then I know who's there, who's right there, because I cannot see it. I've been startled more than once. Luckily, my car has those blind spot indicators. Boy, do I use that one. Because I don't have any peripheral vision on my left side. So if that's levophobia, what do you think dextrophobia is? Fear of everything on your right side, right? So these fears can trap us, and people respond to fear in a few different ways. Sometimes they will be completely shut down. They will simply just not be able to function. They are just so trapped by their fear, they cannot function. Others will work 10 times harder to overcome that fear, to just plow through it, just to work through it. And others will do everything they can to avoid the source of their fear. They'll simply avoid it. And so our third servant fell into this idea of avoiding his fear, right? He was afraid of the master. He avoided it. He buried his talent in the ground. And then when the master came back, he was disappointed with him because he didn't do anything with his talent. Also made me think about us. What are some of these talents that we have been given? I have met a lot of folks with very different talents, but they are talents that you have been given. Yes, many can enhance those talents. You can get better at them, but for some, there is an innate ability that you start with. I have an uncle who, when he was alive, could play anything with strings. And I mean, he could, anything, just put something with strings in front of him and he could do it. I don't have that ability. I did learn to play. And so somewhere in here is my guitar pick. There it is. All right. So maybe music is your talent. Is it? I can't even get to my guitar pick. Maybe it is. How about this one? Anybody have a talent with something like this? Did you ever have a talent? Don't we appreciate those who have a talent with something like this, right? I mean, there are many of us that... So many folks were so afraid when Mark and I got married. It was 43 years ago this September. We got married, and they were so worried about Mark because my very first spice rack had 5 spices on it, including salt and pepper, okay? I didn't know how to cook. They were extremely worried about him. I got all kinds of cookbooks, and let me just say, if you've seen my husband, he survived just fine. He's doing okay. He's doing okay. But if you are someone who is good with one of these, there are plenty of folks out there that are in need that could really use your help, couldn't they? How about this one? What if you're good with something like this? I know that this is clear, sorry. Are you good at teaching? Can you teach something? We're expanding our Sunday school. We spent yesterday preparing 2 rooms. One is for our 4th and 5th grade classroom, and the other one is a cribbery because we have so many babies and toddlers now. We kind of needed to keep everybody safe, and so we're going to have the babies in the cribbery, and the nursery is going to have our toddlers. Isn't this exciting? We need help. Y'all, if you can herd cats, we need your help to help teach our young people. You know, are you good at teaching? Maybe that's you. Maybe this is you. Maybe you can take something that looks like this and turn it into something beautiful. You know, a lot of folks have different crafts that they can do. And guess what? We got a craft bazaar coming up, so we could always use your help. I love those who they can look at just a bunch of odd stuff and, oh, we can make this. And then and all of a sudden it turns into something that you put on Pinterest or something like that. Let me just ask, anybody know how to use one of these things? You know, do you know that you hold it this way and not this way, right? That's a talent. You all heard about ASP and all the work that the kids were doing. Not just having the talent and the know-how to do these things. Somebody tell me why there's 3 on here. I figure out the middle one. It's a level. And I can figure out the middle, but why the heck do you have the others? I haven't figured that out yet. But others do. Man, you all know how to use these things, right? That's a talent. That is a talent. If we have time, I'll tell you my joke about a screwdriver and my husband and a little debate that we had. I don't know if we'll have time. What about this? I only had a couple of bucks in my wallet. Anybody good at managing this stuff? Because I can tell you there are a lot of people out there that don't know how to manage their money. They have no clue and could really use your help. Is that a gift that you've been given, a talent that you have? Are we going to share it, or are we going to bury it in the ground? Are we going to share it with others, or are we going to bury it in the ground? As I mentioned before, some folks are really good with these. Isn't it called a green thumb for a reason, right? My grandmother was so good at it, she could take what looked very much like a dead plant and bring it back to life every single time. I don't have that gift. I work hard at it, but I'm not the gifted gardener. I'll share what I have. I enjoy gardening. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe God is calling you to use your talent because it is something you enjoy. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for sharing your talent today, because it is a gift and a talent to be able to listen to each other and to bring out this beautiful music. No accompaniment. Y'all heard that, right? I heard a harmonica that started them and that was it, right? That's a gift. That is a talent. Are we going to put those talents to good use? That is my prayer, because when we go and talk about being brave and taking a risk, it's about creating something that didn't exist before. It's about taking a step of faith, knowing that God is with you. And I wanted to close with this that I just saw yesterday on the internet. And it's something that was written by Tom Hanks, and he is writing about Jim Lovell. I don't know if you know who Jim Lovell was, but he was an astronaut and had gone into space 4 times, including Apollo 13, that almost fateful trip, but everyone made it back safely, even though there were so many things that happened. Tom Hanks got to play Jim Lovell in that movie, Apollo 13. I do make movie recommendations. I highly recommend that one. But this is what he wrote. There are people who dare, who dream, and who lead others to places we would not go on our own. Jim Lovell, who for a long while had gone further into space and for longer than any other person of our planet, was that kind of guy. His many voyages around Earth and on to so very close to the moon were not made for riches or celebrity, but because such challenges as those are what fuels the course of being alive. And who better than Jim Lovell to make those voyages? On this night of a full moon, he passes on to the heavens, to the cosmos, to the stars. Godspeed on this, your next voyage, Jim Lovell. Tom Hanks. Jim Lovell passed away this week at the age of 97. And so I don't know if you all knew that on his very first voyage into space, as he was orbiting, he was quoting from Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And so take a risk. Know that God is with you. I am so proud to be a part of this church that has been here for 175 years. There's some risk there, right? We have been a stable icon here in this community for that many years. Oh boy, what is God going to do in the future? I so look forward to it. And so may God bless us together as we continue on this journey together.